Hello guys, welcome to the My Top 10 YouTube channel. Today we are going to show you top 10 infectious diseases that changed history. Alongside catastrophic events, irresistible infections are among the top accidental reasons for human passing and enduring the world over. A few infections have left their blemish on humankind, distorting the course of mankind's set of experiences in their wake. In certain cases, similar to that of the bubonic plague, populace levels were definitely decreased for quite a long time a while later. In different cases, for example, polio, the contamination of a famous individual prompted the further acknowledgement of an infection and the requirement for a fix. Bubonic plague, otherwise known as the Dark Death, spread across Europe from east to west during the 14th century. The Yersinia pestis bacterium was answerable for the pestilence and utilized oriental rodent insects as its mediator in arriving at the human populace. Rodents, which conveyed contaminated bugs, voyaged west on the Silk Road and on ships over the Mediterranean. The bubonic plague showed from the beginning how human headways in business and exchange could lethally spread a microorganism. The plague's name comes from the Latin word bubo, alluding to a pustule or abscess. The manifestations were horrifying. They began with fever and perspiring, however advanced to blackish-blue bubbles over the crotch. On the off chance that the bubbles weren't speared, they developed and individuals would kick the bucket from the poisonous development. In like manner, spearing the buboes was regularly similarly as savage and could prompt the microorganism turning out to be airborne. The death rate with this illness was upward of 70%, murdering up to 200 million across Europe and cutting the landmass populace in half. Historians accept that the spread of the bubonic plague added to the fall of the primitive monetary framework and made hopeless harm the Church. Many clerics were tainted subsequent to performing last customs and burial service administrations. Even more pulled out from their areas, terrified of getting the plague. Right up till the present time, the bubonic plague positions among history's most horrifying sicknesses, even as the advancement of anti-infection agents has restricted the Black Death's contemporary events. Smallpox. At the point when Europeans previously showed up in the New World during the late 15th and mid-1600s of years, they utilized progressed military strategies to vanquish North and South America with scurry. In any case, they likewise brought smallpox, which assumed an instrumental function in slaughtering Native Americans. Europeans from the Old World had a long history of living nearby other people with trained creatures, just as eating and drinking from comparable sources. This prompted the spread of numerous sicknesses. However, the individuals who endure built up a noteworthy invulnerability to in any case dangerous microbes. These people were among America's first pilgrims, who carried smallpox to the landmasses as ahead of schedule as 1520. In combination with other Old World sicknesses like influenza and measles, smallpox proceeded to slaughter very nearly 90% of the Native American populace, far outperforming the harm done by late Middle Age fighting. Smallpox was likewise an awful twisting specialist, leaving those tainted with observable wounds over their bodies. Fast forward a few centuries, and smallpox is one of only two infections, the other is rinderpest, to be completely destroyed from the human populace because of inoculation endeavors. Today, smallpox must be found in incredibly monitored research center settings. Spanish influenza. The 1918 influenza pandemic was brought about by one of the deadliest 20th-century microbes, tainting 500 million people around the world. Flare-ups in the United States and Europe before long spread around the world. Although this destructive strain of this season's virus desolated populace focuses unpredictably, it immediately picked up the moniker, Spanish flu, as Spain was hit especially hard by the bug. Indeed, even Spain's King Alfonso XIII contracted it. Spanish flu noticeably affected World War I's front lines as it contaminated numerous youthful, in any case solid people. Records from the time recommend that more Americans were killed by the 1918 influenza than from battling on the front lines. 40% of servicemen in the U.S. Navy gotten this season's virus. Nearly the same number in the U.S. Army were beset too. Seasonal influenza's belongings were noted over the economy and military, with many accepting that the episode affected the heading of World War I by tainting local armies and crushing clinical infrastructure. Flu antibodies were first evolved during the 1940s. Polio. Today, Polio is incredibly uncommon, with moderately couple of cases in the industrialized world since Jonas Salk built up a polio immunization. Before the formation of an immunization, polio was effortlessly communicated in a contaminated person's stool or by means of beads when he sneezed. Polio is regularly asymptomatic. However, when side effects do introduce themselves, they can be crippling. The sickness is famous for deadening its casualties, expecting them to carry on with the remainder of their lives in iron lungs. Loss of motion brought about by polio can't be switched. Albeit portable generators can help a portion of the burden, others actually depend on the iron lungs made acclaimed in the 1940s. The most popular individual to endure polio loss of motion was previous U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. His endeavors to battle the disgrace of the sickness contacted each part of the administration in the years paving the way to and through World War II. Eventually, this changed how a man, and a country, saw loss of motion inciting sickness and ensuing inability. There are 4 phases of syphilis, an explicitly sent sickness that initially shows up with a considerate chancre at the spot of disease. Optional syphilis gives a boundless rash and swollen lymph hubs. The microscopic organisms at that point enters an idle stage prior to surfacing as tertiary syphilis, which prompts neuromuscular degeneration, visual impairment, and dementia. Historians are uncertain concerning how syphilis got a balance in European populaces, yet the main theory says that it was an import from New World colonization. Syphilis has defaced numerous celebrated people, including a few individuals from the Middle Age papacy. In 1508, Julius II couldn't have his foot kissed by individual Christians since it was canvassed in syphilitic sores. 5. Syphilis additionally had a long history of motivating useless clinical cures, for example, the utilization of mercury, which regularly left the contaminated more awful off. Today, syphilis is as yet broad, however it can frequently be restored with penicillin. HIV, AIDS. Not many illnesses have conveyed the disgrace of human immunodeficiency infection, HIV, which changes into AIDS. Researchers accept that the infection traversed from primates to people in Africa during the mid-20th century. However, the infection didn't pick up foothold in mainstream society until the mid-1980s when a few gay men in New York and California displayed weird instances of pneumonia and cancer. Its starting relationship with gay men prompted the early name, Gay-Related Resistant Insufficiency, GRID. Distrustfulness cleared Europe and the United States as people were uncertain what modes were liable for spreading the infection. HIV's relationship with the gay network prompted the improvement of extremist gatherings like ACT-UP, assisting with moving early LGBT backing and cement possible rights for sexual minorities many years after the fact. Tuberculosis (TB) is a dangerous respiratory disease that can take 2 structures, idle TB and dynamic TB. Inert TB isn't infectious, and one's resistant framework can frequently ward it off. Truth be told, 33% of the total populace has dormant TB. In debilitated insusceptible frameworks, dynamic TB can grab hold. Manifestations incorporate episodes of hacking, serious chest torment, night sweats, and loss of craving. The ascent of HIV/AIDS is connected to an ascent in TB cases as debilitated safe frameworks have an almost incomprehensible time warding off the generally idle bacteria. Tuberculosis left its blemish on science in more than one way. In the 19th century, TB was frequently spread through milk. This prompted the improvement of cluster purification, a low-temperature strategy for sanitization which has its underlying foundations in killing tuberculosis in dairy items. Malaria jungle fever is a mosquito-borne illness brought about by parasites that leave those contaminated with influenza-like side effects. Intestinal sickness stays one of the world's most genuine executioners, tainting in excess of 200 million of every 2016 and slaughtering practically 500,000. Malaria's normal specialty is its conceivable function in murdering Alexander the Great. Yet, did you realize that intestinal sickness and protection from it helped in the merciless transoceanic slave exchange? There is no proof of jungle fever in pre-colonial America, and consequently its presentation assaulted local populaces. This drove early European populaces to look to the individuals of Africa, who were impervious to intestinal sickness on the off chance that they endure the illness as youngsters, to deal with America's southern ranches. As intestinal sickness spread quickly over the American South, slaughtering off Native Americans, Africans were constrained into the slave trade. On the clinical side, jungle fever furnished researchers with a central comprehension of transmission vectors, including how illness-conveying creatures contained human populaces and what should be possible to stop them. Ebola. Few diseases have fueled hysteria quite like Ebola, which was only discovered in Africa in the late 1970s. Ebola, short for Ebola hemorrhagic fever, EHF, is a virus that leads to extreme bleeding in humans and other primates. Symptoms can take several days to weeks to develop. They include sore throat, muscular pain, vomiting, diarrhea, and eventual internal and external bleeding. Depending on the strain, Ebola comes with a high mortality rate, killing almost half of those it infects. However, mortality rates can run as high as 90%. The deadliest Ebola outbreak spread out of West Africa in March 2014. It killed 5 times more individuals than all previous outbreaks combined. Cases were reported in the United States and Europe, including the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Spain. Full containment of the virus didn't occur until 2016. Its spread and aftermath dramatically tested the World Health Organization's ability to respond to a modern pandemic. Cholera. At the very least, cholera can go from asymptomatic to lethal in just shy of 3 hours. Cholera is a diarrheal sickness brought about by a bacterium that is generally spread through water or food frameworks that need appropriate sterilization. In spite of the fact that the foundations of the illness were in the Ganges Delta in India, cholera has since spread over the planet. There have been pandemics in South Asia, 1961, Africa, 1971, and the Americas, 1991. Every year, there are upwards of 4 million instances of cholera with in excess of 100,000 biting the dust accordingly. Starting at July 28, 2010, the United Nations made plans to unequivocally perceive clean drinking water as a basic freedom, an improvement characteristically attached to the spread of water-borne microorganisms. Thanks for watching. If you're curious to watch more, top 10 listing on the planet, don't forget to subscribe us and click the bell icon on the right corner, so you will receive the notification when we upload new videos. Thank you and see you again.